This is The Raid, exposing the dark world of America's deportation machine. I'm your host, John Carlos Frey. My name is John Carlos Frey. I'm an investigative freelance journalist, and for the past 2 decades I've been reporting on human rights violations, corporate corruption, and law enforcement abuses. Needless to say, I've had a busy and full career. I grew up very close to the U.S.-Mexico border in southern San Diego. From my family home, I could see the borderline itself, and we were so close to the border that I could actually hear the sounds coming from Tijuana, Mexico. Seeing the U.S. Border Patrol helicopter with a powerful spotlight searching for migrants was a nightly occurrence. There were always Border Patrol vehicles with agents on the hunt for border crossers. Sometimes the migrants would run through our backyard. That game of cat and mouse was very familiar to me. Even at a young age, I knew the reason that they were being apprehended was because they had crossed the border without going through a port of entry. The migrants obviously didn't have proper documents to show a customs official, so they just crossed somewhere else. But I also understood, even as a boy, that the main reason that they were coming across the border was for work. Some employer in California was hiring the undocumented immigrants by the millions. Imagine living in Mexico without a job and someone in California offering you a salary 10 times higher than what you could get at home. Would you make that journey across the border? According to recent studies, almost 2 million undocumented workers make up nearly 10% of California's labor force, the richest state in America. I question who is more responsible for such a large group of workers coming across the border, the migrants or the industries that employ them. Are the migrants to blame for taking a job, or are the employers who bank on cheap labor responsible for luring them over the border? As far as I can remember, brown people running across the border to find work has been a part of my life. Turning them into scapegoats and blaming them for the ills of society has also been a part of the political narrative for decades. Employ them when you need them, and make them the enemy to scare voters for political gain. I've reported on that contrast and that hypocrisy for my entire career, and now more than ever, I want to use this podcast to expose the injustice of it all. As a journalist, I'm held to a standard of impartiality and fairness. There's an understanding that I should report all sides of the story. Today, that last part is problematic. As a journalist, I'm also tasked with holding people in positions of authority accountable. I'm required to expose a corrupt government, and I plan to do just that. This podcast is going to focus and highlight the Trump administration's illegal justifications for violating basic human rights. I'm not going to report on why it's okay for a masked, covert, militarized federal police force to yank a mother out of her car with no probable cause as she takes her children to school. My job is to shine a light on the atrocity of a government overstepping its authority and violating the laws designed to protect the public, documented or not. Just because someone doesn't carry the proper paperwork to be in the United States does not automatically grant the federal government the authority to disregard the Constitution. The federal government does not have the right nor the authority to violate its own protocols and laws, and that part, the abuses and the violations of those in power, will be my primary focus. Secondarily, I will focus on the effects the raids are having on the community at large, the workforce, and the individuals. It may sound like I've passed judgment already and that my reporting will be biased, and there is truth to that. My reporting will be biased on the side of the oppressed, the violated, and the defenseless. The government is more powerful than the migrant. The Trump administration has removed the right of due process, leaving the migrant defenseless and vulnerable to abuse and a victim of crimes. In mass numbers, the government has become the offender. Everything has changed, and so will my focus as a journalist. These are not normal times, and legacy media is broken and mostly ineffective at holding the current administration to account. I've been covering immigration for the past 20 years, and I have never witnessed the blatant disregard for norms and the law. According to experts, the tactics used by the federal government to conduct the current immigration raids are violating the tenets of the Fourth Amendment, which protect against warrantless and unlawful entry, arbitrary detention, generalized search warrants, and unreasonable force. The federal government is also participating in racial discrimination and profiling, not to mention the due process violations such as lack of legal counsel, detention without hearings, and abuses of judicial process. So don't ask me to be fair and balanced when the heavy hand of the federal government, sworn to uphold the Constitution, has thrown it in the trash. This is no longer a system based in fairness and respect for the law. And then there's the issue that's very close to my heart: freedom of the press. I could not have had the career that I've had without the protections of the First Amendment. The Trump administration has sued news organizations and continues with threats of lawsuits that are making many news agencies restrict their coverage. A robust free press should be able to cover the president and their administration as well as their activities without fear or favor. The First Amendment states clearly that the government is not allowed to censor the media, period. The Pentagon recently released its new press policy stating that it would require media to pledge no gathering of information without approval from the government. That is blatant censorship. Threatening lawsuits because of unfavorable coverage of the government is censorship. Firing Jimmy Kimmel because of jokes the president doesn't approve of is censorship. With regard to the immigration raids, reporters are being pepper sprayed, beaten, and detained. Cameras are being blocked, and news agencies are being scrutinized. A journalist and legal U.S. resident from El Salvador was recently apprehended while reporting on immigration raids, and several weeks later was deported. If I were working for a news agency right now, I would not be able to speak as freely as I am. I would be censored by corporate media lawyers who would not want to incur the wrath of the president. That scares me, because you're not going to get the full story, and the government's going to quickly become the dominant voice. That's called propaganda. I have personal experience with censorship from the government. After Trump took office in November, it became increasingly more difficult for me to tell the kinds of stories I was used to producing. For the longest time, I had great support from media outlets to pursue stories that held government accountable. I had earned a reputation of doing impactful stories, and I was grateful to be able to make a difference, no matter how small. But then everything changed. An investigative journalist such as myself, dedicated to calling out the government violations and government corruption, became a dangerous person to hire. The kinds of stories I built my career on were no longer popular because they would bring scrutiny from the Trump administration. In the past, I could call out the Trump administration's mistreatment of immigrants, but all of a sudden, I became a freelance journalist to avoid.
This is a disaster built exactly from the hands of the Trump administration. I've also heard, while I've been at the border in Nogales, that children are still being separated. I don't think that that's being reported enough, that this is still a process.
Trump threatened my former broadcast news employers with lawsuits and pulling their FCC licenses. The entire media landscape changed overnight, and pointed stories about the heavy hand of government were no longer popular. I was out of a job. My colleagues in broadcast media stopped returning my calls, and every story I tried to get off the ground failed. You are witnessing a full-scale assault on the Constitution, and surprise, surprise, your government is lying to you. After a while, if no one's paying attention, lies become truths. Conspiracy theories are repeated and not discredited. A once free press and the First Amendment have been co-opted. It's now easier than ever to spread lies about immigrants because you'll rarely hear their side of the story. News agencies are reporting that the raids are taking place, but rarely do I see a report about all the violations of laws committed by ICE and the Border Patrol. I'm aware that this is not necessarily earth-shattering and new information for many of you. I only bring it up to provide context to where we are today and where we need to go. I left the world of corporate media and tried my hand at true independent journalism. Since broadcast news outlets are mostly broken, I thought I would take my skill set to the streaming outlets. I know how to make a film and make it about something important to our society. I thought I would start pitching these stories not to the news outlets, but to streaming outlets like HBO or Netflix, and I had some success. I'll give you an example, and it will most likely land me in hot water, but I don't really care anymore. Even though the streamers are not news agencies, they will sometimes take on projects that deal with current events. I worked on stories with Showtime, Hulu, and HBO, and it seemed like maybe I could do good work by not working for the broadcast news outlets. But along came Trump for his second term, and everything changed. With the help of colleagues, I was able to place a story with HBO that was damning to the U.S. Border Patrol. It exposed the U.S. government cover-up of a migrant death at the hands of Border Patrol. This documentary was fact-based, and a grand jury was even impaneled to investigate the agents involved. All these facts are in this film, and given the climate of the Border Patrol and ICE raids today, it would be worthy information for the general public to know about. With all these facts and the value to the public, HBO chose not to release the film. I worked on this story for years. HBO got behind it and spent several $1 million to produce it. But when Trump was elected, HBO's strategy seemed to change. They haven't said Trump's election is the reason that it sits on the shelf, but it appears that they're afraid of backlash from the current administration. Relevant, pertinent, potent information of how the U.S. Border Patrol has devised a corrupt system to cover up their crimes, and HBO has chosen to take a multi-million-dollar loss instead of releasing a film that would serve the public. I wish I could say that this was a one-off or a rare case, but we've seen censorship with pressure from the government over and over. The bottom line is that you're not getting facts. Rhetoric is winning over reporting, propaganda over truth. I won't do that to you. This is my job, and I'm convinced more than ever that if I don't do my work in a more pointed and aggressive way today, the opportunity for the United States to take the next bold step into a freer and more just society will be over. I have to do my part. We're at a tipping point. The grand experiment that is America will no longer exist, and the idea of a free press will fade long before democracy fails. I'm going to bring you my expertise and my experience. I truly believe that the measure of a country, and even the true measure of an individual, is reflective of how we treat the least amongst us. This podcast will focus primarily on the immigration raids, the violations of the federal government, and the complexities of our broken immigration system. This is a fast and ever-changing story, and much of the reporting is getting lost and not covered. We will feature newsmakers, experts, activists, journalists, and of course those most affected, the immigrant population itself. We'll also serve as a hub and a resource for all things concerning the immigration raids. You can always go to our YouTube channel and find up-to-date videos and postings from around the country. You can also visit our website at theraidpodcast.org to find more resources with links and downloads. A well-informed public is foundational to a robust democracy. I've been reporting on the U.S. immigration system for a while now, and in that time, I've not witnessed this kind of cruelty and this chaos in violation of civil liberties as I am today. It's not very journalistic of me to suggest that we have to face what's happening to the immigrant population and our country. This is the time to get involved wherever you can. The more we do, the easier it becomes to shoulder the discomfort. If we do something about what we're witnessing, no matter how small, we've made a difference. I'm not supposed to advocate or suggest. My job is to report. But we're not in normal times, and if after this podcast I never work as a journalist again, so be it. I will speak truth to power regardless of the consequences. Tell me what's going on in your neighborhoods. Send me video. Speak up. Speak out. You can support the podcast by posting, sharing it with your friends. You can make a financial contribution. We rely on you to keep this effort alive. I'll do my best to shepherd you through the maze of this all-out assault on immigrants and a fractured free press. We still have time to turn this around, but only with your participation. Thank you for listening to The Raid, available wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about our guests and the subjects we cover, please visit our website at theraidpodcast.org.